A compelling detective story, a cloak and dagger action, and a romantic drama, all these stories were taken from real life. The history of Kazakhstan is inseparable from the world history. Reflections on history, our version.
Those who paved the way for Kazakhstan's television to be the first, without takes. Ratings and letters. Don't forget to tune in. Soviet television makes a sharp transition from a screen size the size of a matchbox to a screen of 1 square meter. Socialist Alma-Ata, 1937. Six years before that, on May the 1st, 1931, a TV broadcast in Moscow was held. Then it was called long-sightedness. This TV broadcast was seen in even other countries, although without sound. But starting from October of the same year, from midnight to midnight, you can watch telecast daily. The only thing you need is to find the right frequency and have the right receiver. It was said that the Soviet Union already had television before the war. We almost did not believe in it. It was so extraordinary. The first television went off the assembly line in 1933. During the next 5 years, the most enlightened and wealthy citizens bought them. The TVs were small, but the impressions they gave were huge. But then the war started, and for a while people forgot about the technical innovation. The Soviets went back to it on May the 7th in 1945, on the eve of Victory Day. In 1951, the studio of the Central Television was created. After 4 years, the country lived in a new regime of daily television. Shabalovka, 53. Igor Kirillov is one of the first anchors of the Soviet Union. I was walking around the Shabalovka yard. There were a lot of picturesque places, a lilac garden, and together we were coming up with ideas. What else could we talk about on TV? And then I went out live on the air. The start of Kazakh television was on the 8th of March in 1958. We were the first ones, and we were very proud of this because everything was for the first time. It was the very beginning, secrets of the first broadcast. There's a picture. It was taken after the first broadcast in the Kazakh language at the round table. That television was much more responsible. Cameras at the time were bulky, and there was some headlines. It went someone like this: with a camera into the soul of Iran. Chapter 1. To be the first. The Almaty TV Center. Just a year ago, we saw its foundation, and now about 10,000 TV sets receive the signal. Look, here's my father, Igor Savin, the first chief editor of Kazakhstan's television. In the summer of 1957, Kanafia Mustafin, chairman of the Committee on Television and Radio Broadcasting at the Council of Ministers of the Kazakh SSSR, invited me to work in an amazing position as an inspector on television at the committee. Savin at first was confused, but then he was offended and indignant how a well-known screenwriter could be appointed to the post of an inspector. They explained to him that the medical inspector and financial instructor have nothing to do with this. Kanafia Mustafin threw his head back, squinting, and mockingly said, "We have to create television in the Republic, and no one knows where to start." But in general, they'd been preparing for this new era in advance. They'd built a new television tower. And here is also a team of the first TV crew on the background of a television center, still unfinished, and there is a piece of the television tower itself. The first question is where to get specialists for radio, cinema, and the theater. But in fact, this list was not limited. Education didn't play a special role. For example, one of the most famous TV hosts, Nelly Omarova, was a forensic expert. Nelly Omarova and Zulhia Zhurmatova were the first anchors, the most important of the time in general, admired by everyone. They were very famous, but it must be said that they were selected carefully by a very responsible commission. It included people like Shakan Aymanov, Kalipek Kwanishpayev, Maisel, Prosolov, and Galamzhanova. During the selection process, attention was paid to their appearance, the ability to think quickly on their feet, and their charm and voice. On March the 8th, 1958, the television era of Kazakhstan began. However, it began quite modestly. Nelly Omarova and Zulhiya Jomatova opened the program schedule. We had a little to say. Hello, dear Almaty citizens. We are starting regular programs. We congratulate you on a significant date and also on the International Women's Day. And now, watch the film. And that's all. After that, there was a film called Member of the Government. In several rooms, TV sets were installed. The tension was unbelievable. What if it wouldn't work? We were trembling. What will happen? And then the film played without interruption. And everyone shouted, "Hooray!" Hooray, they did it. Curiously enough, the main media outlet of the time, Kazakhstan Pravda, didn't mention the event at all. Chapter 2. Without takes. While broadcasts were conducted only from the studio, the day when spectators could see a report directly from a place or of an event, a football competition and a celebratory demonstration was not that far away. The signal aired, not always with a clear sound, and no special effects. In the literal sense, with a wave of a hand, this was the cue to speak to the camera. We worked in very difficult conditions, especially the first winter. There were still drafts and frost within the walls of the TV center. At the time, we didn't use ballpoint pens because the ink froze and we sat in coats. The buildings of the television center had not been completed by that time. We all sat in the lobby. There was a movie editorial over there, the Department of Propaganda and Youth. 2 tables and it was already an editorial office. Everyone was sitting together and all of them knew everything about each other. A week after the first telecast, everyone realized that with just a narrator in the studio, it was not so interesting. We had to come up with something more entertaining. Then Boris Sagitov appeared, a brilliant photographer. He traveled with journalists and took photographs, and we began to illustrate our telecasts with his photographs. Then they found an amateur 16mm movie camera and they began to shoot. One of the restaurants was converted into a developing room and there was no special equipment either. In the pots, the solution was diluted, the frame was wrapped around with this film, and it probably was at the dawn of the cinema. We washed it there, then developed it and put it in another pot with a fixer. And here we insert this narrow film. The announcer, well, of course, rehearses the text before that to fit in with the length of the film, and read this text next to the frame. Subtitles were made in this way. A whole shop of artists wrote on cardboard. For example, Ivan Ivanov, the first tractor driver of the farm. They would put this cardboard sign in front of the camera, yes, with special cameras. The cameras in the studio were primitive, bulky and heavy, weighing up to 400 kilograms each. They looked like huge chests of drawers. Now people use compact portable cameras, but before you had to bring along with you a wagon of lights and cables. And for carrying heavy cables, there were special workers, cable masters. For some reason, they were mostly women. And the pictures on the cameras were turned upside down. Television was black and white in those days. The operators used red filters. And to make sure that the lips of the announcers didn't look too pale, they used green lipstick. TV anchors often used this option. They slightly narrowed the size horizontally as well. Naturally, a person appeared not so chubby. The first documentary film was also developed on the pot. The first concert and even the first Kazakhstan television series. It was called Abay Avenue, starring Kanabek Baysetov, and all live. Artists, singers were frequent guests in the studio, but not many dared to perform live on the air. A house museum of Mukhtar Awezov. This is the office of Mukhtar Omarhanovich. Yes, it's true. This was his favorite place in his house where he worked. It was his library. When did a TV set appear in the house? As soon as it was available for purchase in the Soviet Union, then he immediately bought one. And he was one of the first Kazakh public figures to come and work in television. He worked on the air several times. Without cheat sheets, he spoke easily and freely. He visited several times. He was very interested in this miracle. Miracles always have a place in life. Once it was suddenly discovered that the Kazakhstani programs without any relay masts were being watched in Kyrgyzstan. It turned out it was just a reflection of the signal from the snow peaks. And Oezov then said, before these mountains divided two nations, now, thanks to these mountains, the two nations are united. Chapter 3. Ratings in Letters. Another telecast starts. One of the first Kazakh children who appeared on TV was a daughter of the chief editor, Mayra Savina. When I was 6 months old, there was a story about the Almaty knitting factory, and it was necessary to demonstrate children's pants. Yes, she was a baby. I carried her in my arms and showed clothes on her. The ratings of programs and TV hosts was determined by the number of letters. If 100 bags of letters arrived, then the telecast was a success, and if there were 10 bags, they were said to us, guys, redo it or we'll take it off the air. There were reviews from readers. We had to reply to each letter. Journalists traveled to Moscow to exchange experiences. The capital's television men also had something to learn from their counterparts in Kazakhstan. Approximately 6 months later, the Kazakh opera was taken to the Soviet capital. My parents told me about it. It was the opera Dudarai. This was one of the first telecasts. And it was a complete success. On Central Television, Igor Savin recalled, "We were in delight and wonder. After all, Kazakh television had just started." Almaty TV made a big impression on me. Yes, and Levitan himself said that the Kazakh group of TV hosts from Almaty were one of the best. Here it is, in the photo together with the Kazakh editorial office. But the growing professionalism nevertheless did not completely save them from mistakes. After all, only those who had nothing to do did not make any mistakes. In the Department of Propaganda, they said smilingly, "The word is not a sparrow, it will fly. You will not catch it, but if we catch it, you will fly." In the 50s, the story was aired and saved only in the memories of those who saw it. And on live TV, people were also live. We once invited as a girl from Kaskelian State Farm to tell us about her successes. Her speech was supposed to be 10 minutes long, and then when it reached the end, there was some kind of phrase, "Here we are, the stockbreakers of the Kaskelian State Farm, we give commitments," and so on. Then she asked, "Can I start again from the beginning?" And she started again from the beginning. Of course, the entire schedule got messed up. In the very first aired telecast from the streets, a drunk company got into a shot, and their profanities as well. There were, of course, other mistakes, and the control system was quite tough. 2 ladies sat and watched TV without stopping. August of 1959, the first interactive program. The editor-in-chief was instructed to answer the workers' letters on air. Never before had any of the television workers done anything like this. But it turned out that I was on air on that day, at the hour, at the moment of the rebellion in Temirtau. The shooting began. It was the massacre. Because of the poor organization of labor, Temirtau 59 rebelled. As a result, party officials, in an innocuous speech, saw a seditious connection. Secretary of the Central Committee for Propaganda was looking at the screen with horror at the same time listening to the radio message about Temirtau. He decided that this means in general a counter-revolution. It was hard to prove that there was no counter-revolution. After all, programs were not recorded at the time. That's how Igor Savin lost his position as editor-in-chief. Epilogue. Don't forget to tune in. Only by the mid-60s did people start to manage airtime. They started to record programs, yes, and technical equipment had improved significantly and professionals gained their experience. Technically, they were equipped even better than the Central Television Network, and I was struck by an information program that first went on air in the Kazakh language for 15 or 20 minutes, and then only in Russian. In 1970, the programs were broadcast in color. Every decade was marked by new advances in television. Of course, you can't talk about everything. Much remains behind the scenes, and it's always hard to pave the way for others. Let's go on with a concert of artists of Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan.